Hello and welcome to iOS Development Tutorials, where we will teach you how to make a great iOS application starting from the very beginning. Let's go ahead and boot up Xcode. Once we have it open, we can go to File, New, and Project, and we'll start on our first project. Now this starts us up first with templates. That way we can go ahead and at least get started from at least not square zero, but from square one. The one that we'll use the majority in our tutorials is going to be the single view application. So we'll select it and say next. And then this is where it starts asking us for some information about the application we want to make. The main thing we have to key in is what is going to be the name. We'll call it Hello World. The company, which you can have as just your name, and then also the identifier. What the identifier and the bundle identifier are is they work together so that when you submit your application to the App Store, Apple will know if the app is an upgrade, if it's a very first application that you're adding, and get all the information it needs to know the app that you've submitted, who it belongs to, and so forth. The class prefix is as you add applications, such as classes, more header files, things like that. It's what do you want the very beginning of the file to be called. Mostly for organizational purposes and things of that nature. So for this particular app, if we want to have HW underscore, wrong place, HW underscore to stand for Hello World, anytime we add a new class or header file or storyboard to it, it's going to have the prefix of HW underscore. For our tutorials, we'll leave it blank. Devices will let you decide then if it's going to be an iPad only app, an iPhone only app, or a universal app, which is both iPad and iPhone. They both have the pros and cons depending on which way you go, but again, for our tutorials we're going to be using iPhone. The last decision we need to make is storyboards or not storyboards. I'm a big supporter of storyboards. It makes the coding and the time to finish the application so much faster, because a lot of the parts where you would normally have to key in the code can all be done from the storyboard using drag and drop, and that way you don't have to start writing all the code yourself, but just use the tools that Apple has given you. And then the last as well as the automatic reference counting. I highly recommend using this. What this does is as you use your program, you have to tell the iPhone or the iPad that you're wanting to use memory for the application. Anytime you create a button, a new view, you have to tell the iPhone, I need some memory for it. Now, as you create the memory and you're not using those objects anymore, you have to give the memory back to the iPhone. Otherwise, as you're using the program, it's just going to keep growing and growing and growing and growing until ultimately your program will just crash. What automatic reference counting does is that way, instead of having to remember to give the memory back to the device, it does it for you. So those are the two checkboxes I highly recommend having checked, just to make coding easier and faster using those two pieces. So we'll say next, and now we have to tell it where we want to save it. So we'll go ahead and save it under the folder that I have set up for iOS tutorials, and we'll say create. Since I already do have it, I'm going to replace it. And now it gives us our very first screen of the basic summary of the application. There's a lot of information here that it automatically presents, but the only parts that we're really going to be concerned about, at least this time, and it's more for just talking, is this orientation setup, and then also the icons and launch images. Now what the orientation is how is the app supposed to look in the different orientations. So for instance, I can have it normal, or if I do put it in landscape, what is it going to look like, and can I even run it in landscape? The app icons is the actual icon that you see when you launch the app. Pretty obvious. And then there's a different icon that you have to select for the Retina display. Now you'll see it does give you the pixel sizes that it looks for. On the Retina is 114 by 114. And then 57 by 57 for just a regular iPhones. The launch images are the same thing. Whenever you first start up your application, these are the images that you see of the application, very similar to a splash screen. So those are the basic parts of quick customizations that you can do to your application without having to do any kind of major coding. On the left hand side of the Xcode, you'll see you have app delegates, a view controller, and then that storyboard that we said we wanted to use. If you click on the storyboard, what you see is you see this little arrow, which means this is the entry point to the application, and then you have your main screen. This is the very first thing you see when you start your application. So whatever you put on this screen, that is, as soon as you start it, that's what your user is going to see. For our first demo, what we're just going to do is we're just going to add a label. Nothing too fancy, just a simple label, and you'll see that we centered it onto the program, or onto the window, where we can do centered onto the window, so we can actually see just centered there. So if we double click on label, now we can change our text. So on this particular tutorial, just to get us started, what we will do is we will call this, or we will label this as "I cannot be changed!" exclamation point. So that's it. That's the label that we've already added. So if we click on Run, what it will do is it's going to compile all those little pieces that we just did, and the initial build usually does take longer. And then it's going to boot up our iPhone simulator and then install the app on it, and then let us see what the application itself was. Alright, so with the simulator booted up, it's installed it, and there it is. Here's our application that we just installed with the label "I cannot be changed." And then, as I said, is if you rotate your different displays, you'll see that it does change just as you would expect it to. And that's it. That's the basics of a Hello World. We've added a label to our view, we've run it, we have our different orientations, and then in the next tutorial what we'll do is we'll start working with some buttons. How can I put a button on the application that'll let me change that text? Because although it may say it cannot be changed, it very well can be changed. So in our next tutorial we'll start looking at buttons, and then moving on from there, how can we even do some more customizations. So like, subscribe, leave a comment if you have any questions, and we look forward to seeing you in the next tutorial.